When you hear the name Honda, you probably think of reliable cars and motorcycles, right? But the story of the man behind the brand, Soichiro Honda, wow. It's an incredible story of failure, disaster, and just unbelievable resilience. All right, let's get into this. I mean, just look at this. The journey from where he started to where he ended is almost hard to believe. In 1922, a 15-year-old Soichiro shows up for his first big job at an auto repair shop, and they tell him to look after the owner's kid, a babysitter. Fast forward a few decades, and that same guy had built the biggest motorcycle company on the entire planet. So how in the world did he get there? Well, the story starts in this tiny, poor village. Honda grew up as a blacksmith's son, so he was always around the sounds of metal and machinery, and he was completely fascinated by engines. But funny enough, he hated school. He actually forged his family's stamp so he could fake his report cards and hide his bad grades. Then, when he was just 8 years old, this strange new sound echoed through his village. It was a Ford Model T, the very first car he had ever laid eyes on, and he was just completely captivated, mesmerized by this machine that seemed to move all on its own. You know, his own words really capture that raw, instinctual feeling he had. He said, "Without even thinking why, I found myself chasing it down the road as hard as I could run." That single moment, right there, sparked a lifelong obsession. And that obsession drove him to drop out of school at 15 and just head straight for Tokyo. What happened next was this super rapid transformation from, a glorified babysitter to a master mechanic in just a few short years. His start at the Archokai auto shop was, let's be honest, pretty humbling. For months, his main jobs were cleaning and literally carrying the owner's baby on his back. But, when the shop got overwhelmed, he finally got his shot to work on engines, and his talent was just undeniable. By 17, he was a race engineer on a championship-winning car. And by 21, his boss had so much faith in him that he was put in charge of a whole new branch of the business. So his career was just skyrocketing. But what came next was this relentless series of catastrophes that honestly would have broken almost anyone. This was his trial by fire and by failure and by complete and utter ruin. So after starting his own company, he kept up his passion for racing. But in 1936, he was in this horrific crash that nearly killed him. A fractured arm, dislocated shoulder, serious facial damage. It forced him to give up the sport he loved forever. Then came the professional humiliation. He staked his whole new company on making piston rings for Toyota. He makes a batch of 50, submits them for inspection, and Toyota accepts only 3. 3 out of 50. His product was a total failure. He had to swallow his pride and go back to school just to learn the basics of metallurgy. But after years of studying and refining his process, he finally succeeded. He built this awesome factory that employed 2,000 people. Things were finally looking great. But this was 1944. An American B-29 dropped a bomb and scored a direct hit, completely destroying his factory. And as if a direct bomb hit wasn't enough, just a few months later, the devastating Nankai earthquake struck. It collapsed what little was left of his business. He had lost everything. Again. He sold the salvageable ruins to Toyota and just walked away. Now, for most people, this would be the end of the story. But for Soichiro Honda, rock bottom became the foundation for what was next. In the total desolation of post-war Japan, he found his next big idea, an engine on a bicycle. I mean, really think about it for a second. His country is in ruins, food and fuel are incredibly scarce, and he had literally lost his entire business twice over. After all that, what could he possibly do? His solution was just beautifully simple. He found a surplus of these tiny generator engines that were used to power military radios during the war. He realized he could attach one of these to a regular bicycle, creating desperately needed, cheap motorized transportation for the Japanese people. It was brilliant. The idea was a huge hit, but he needed money to scale up. So what does he do? He writes this incredibly passionate letter to 18,000 bicycle shop owners across Japan, telling him his plan to get the country moving again. And in this amazing show of faith, 3,000 of them wrote back with money, providing the capital he needed to officially start the Honda Motor Company. With that grassroots funding and a genius idea, Honda was back in business. And this time, he wasn't just building a factory. He was on his way to building a global empire. And the core of his global success really came from this simple principle of accessibility. After years of development, his company released the Honda Super Cub. Get this, when it hit the United States in 1958, it cost just $295. That was like a quarter of the price of a Harley-Davidson. It was cheap, it was reliable, and it absolutely took the world by storm. But he never forgot his first love, cars. Government officials told him, Japan doesn't need another automaker. He totally ignored them. He launched the small, efficient Civic right at the peak of the 1970s oil crisis. Perfect timing. Its innovative CVCC engine was a game changer. And then he followed that up with the larger Accord, which became one of the best-selling sedans in history. After all this incredible, world-changing success, you'd think he'd be pretty proud, right? But Honda's own reflection on it all is just so humbling. He said, "Looking back on my work, I feel that I was doing nothing more than mistakes, blunders, and serious omissions." He saw his entire journey not as a string of triumphs, but as a series of lessons that he learned from failure. Soichiro Honda's life really shows us that a racing crash, a corporate rejection, a bombing, and an earthquake, they aren't necessarily endings. They can be the raw materials for your greatest achievements, which kind of leaves us with a question to think about. What failures will build